And Victoria. So there's lots of wisdom and knowledge among the panelists, and I'm sure among everybody in this Zoom room. So I'm really excited to start this process. What I wanted to do is actually have them introduce themselves a little bit before I start asking a lot of questions. So I was thinking that maybe if each of you could take 3 to 5 minutes and introduce yourselves, because I know I wouldn't do you guys justice. And maybe there's a specific thing that you'd want to share in this moment. That would be great. And then I do have some questions already, and of course we will open it to everybody. So I'd like to maybe invite Lakshmi. Would you like to start? And then we can move towards the rest of the panelists.
Thank you, Shweta. And hi, everyone. I'm Lakshmi. And I know we're all in different time zones, so I'm not going to wish you any time of the day, but that you're good wherever you are and whatever time that you are in at the moment. I'm reporting from South India. It's night 8 p.m. here. How do I introduce myself? I have been an activist, an educator, researcher, facilitator, all in the environment sector for the past 15 years. And I think I have come around circle in sort of trying to integrate all these roles. And I end up in a facilitator role, I think, most often these days. And that's probably what I would call myself. The current project that I'm running, Inner Climate Academy, addresses the inner dimensions of the current climate crisis. It is to ask the question, what is the climate crisis asking of us? What does it mean to be alive during this unprecedented time in the planet's history? And how do we provide spaces for ourselves to ask these questions of us? So I engage with these questions quite regularly through the Academy. We provide spaces for inner reflection, inquiry, discussion, but also experiential processes, group exercises to help groups of people go through different channels of inquiry into these deep questions of our times. And why? Why these deep questions when we don't have the time or the luxury for it? I know we all feel the urgency of the times that we are alive in. There seems like we don't have time for anything. How can we sit around talk about these things when there's 100 things to be done? Well, my answer to that is there's a quote from Tyson Yunkaporta that I like very much from his latest book, Sand Talk. In which it's a very small quote, but I really like it because he says, there is a space between action and reaction, which is interaction, and that's where all the magic happens. So I'd like to invite, myself and groups of people into that space of interaction that is liminal, that can create magic that can change what's between the worlds. And I think as different groups of people meet, we can hold space for this magic to happen. And so that is what inspires me. It's not easy. It is difficult work. But I don't see how we can go forward without creating these spaces. And the other reason for my why is, I feel like we have come, as humans, we have come to a place where we are hitting against walls, no matter where we are, what we are working on, whether it's social justice, environmental justice, the climate crisis, the food crisis, the economic crisis, the mental health crisis, the well-being crisis. all the multiple crises that we are currently facing, we always come against that wall. And really, what is that wall? Is that wall actual solutions? Or is that wall us? How we are and who we are in this world? And so I would like to see what that wall is and see if we can peel layers of it together, and peel layers of each other, and see what is there. What is it really asking us? Perhaps it is to see ourselves as who we truly are, which is that we are an integral part of this world, worthy of love, just as any other being or thing in this world that exists. So my invitation really is for that. I think I will stop there. Shweta, over to you. Thank you.
That was a beautiful way of opening, and I think setting the context for us. I've actually been on a similar journey, been really deeply connecting with sacred ecology, reading the Braiding Sweetgrass at the moment, and The Hidden Life of Trees, and Joanna Macy, and also going down this route of sacred ecology. So I really resonate with what you said, Lakshmi, about the magic. I think it's so true. And to that, I thought maybe either Leora or Lauren, who are Leora's founder of Gaia University, and Leora's been doing sort of rewilding and reconnecting work with Weaving US. I'd like to invite one of you to maybe speak next. I think that connection after what Lakshmi has opened and shared would be quite powerful. So either of you, if you would like to share your work in the world and a little bit about yourselves, that'd be great. Should I just choose? I can see Lauren smiling at
me. Just choose.
Yes. I go ahead, Lauren.
Okay, I'll go. Well, I love that I get to pick up on the thread of magic. So hello, thank you for that. Lakshmi, it's nice to hear from you. My name is Lauren Hage, and I'm calling from Lenape territory in New Jersey. I actually live most of the time in California, Southern Pomo territory, but I'm here visiting family at the moment. And I am, what to say about myself? My Hebrew name is Liba, and the root of that word means heart. And so I feel very called by and dedicated to all matters of the heart. And that's kind of a big thing to say, because what isn't all matters of the heart? But where that weaves for me and the work that I do with Weaving Earth is related to ecological earth. We call it earth intimacy, co-liberation, prayerful action, and embodiment. And we weave that curriculum together into a body of work that we call relational education. And so I'm the executive director and one of the co-founders for Weaving Earth. And yeah, we're a nonprofit, but we call ourselves a social profit. And basically, we've been asking the question for a while: how do we educate for our times? And the way that we engage with that question also is that it's a living question, because our times are, yes, there's an arc, and yes, they're always changing. So how do we really be relational, responsive, adaptive, emergent, present to what's happening in the field of my body, the field of our body together as we relationally engage, and then the field as a whole. And we also are really focused on the root of so many things being related to this notion that human beings are separate from nature, and as opposed to a part of it. And so looking at that wound of separation and how that then ties to systems of dominance and to so many social systems of oppression that are that have been dominating so many things. So we're looking at how all of that relates together, and then what do we do about it? And of course, that very directly relates to the climate. And I think there's probably more that I will say related to that when you ask questions. But I really appreciated what you were saying, Lakshmi, about the magic and the space in between. And I think the last thing I'll say is we also were really focused on our attention and what it is that is drawing our attention in, and what can we give our attention to that can support us in this time of climate crisis. So more that I could say about that, but I will leave it there. Thanks for listening to that. Nice to see you all, meet you all. And I guess I will pass it to Leora. Is that the
Sure.
the right
Yeah.
step?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I just invite everybody else on the call to also think about, as our panelists are introducing themselves, to really think about, hold some questions for them as they talk about their journeys and I think what's important in their work. You know, the intention, I think, of this session is to talk about a response, or maybe what educators, or what stories we need to tell in order for people to have responses to the climate crisis, or what should they be, what are the challenges facing us in doing that. So just an invitation to everybody else to maybe hold some of that as well. And yes, Leora, I will hand it over to you.
Hello. I apologize for not being able to come on video. I'm in a very rural place in Northern California, in a valley where we lived for a number of years, seeking to regenerate the almond industry here, and planted 1,000 regenerative trees, which are now blossoming. So we came up to have a look. Actually live in Mexico in an eco-village, Huehuecoatl, that I am a co-founder of, which is now about to complete 40 years of existence. And so that's where my usual base is. I'm, as you might have guessed by that data, I'm a 60s person. I grew up in the 60s in New York, and I was an activist at that time, did a lot of protesting. And by the end of the 60s, decided that activism was insufficient and that I needed to become an actionist and focus on what can actually be done about all of the problems that I could see happening in and on the planet. And so I began to focus on community, and did a lot of work with the Global Eco Village Network and getting that going. And out of that, you mentioned that I'm a co-founder of Guy University, and that came out of the desire to make a course that would help people to learn how to make eco-villages, to found eco-villages. And I realized that a course really was not long enough, that it was important that people have a longer term experience in which they could really trial out all of the things that they were learning in the course and see what was working and what was not working, and enable people to retrial and remake and rethink their thinking and so on. So this is related to that question you raised around how we might reimagine education. So I met at that time Andrew Langford, who's a permaculture designer from 40 years ago, knows all about the trees and the plants and all of the things that go into the living systems on the planet. And we decided that what was needed was our own university. We needed to have a university which would enable people to, over a long term, do a a diploma or a bachelor's degree or a master's degree focused on the kinds of things that were needed on our planet. And so we founded Gaia University 17 years ago. And in the course of that, met up also with Kelly Teamy and Udi Mandel, and then later Manish and Victoria Haro. And Ecoversities was founded. I think many of you are part of that. And we have not been so active in Ecoversities, but have been kind of following along and supporting it, because having universities, educational systems which are focused on the whole basic ecology, ecosystems of our planet are really significant, and even more significant in these times of climate crisis. So in the very, I'm summarizing, but in the most recent past, I've been living climate crisis. As I said, I live in Mexico most of the year. I also did a project for 8 years called La Caravana Arcoiris por la Paz, in which we traveled all through Central and South America in caravans to activate. We are indeed in a crisis, and just right here in California, where I came about a week ago, the friend who we're staying with, she said that many of the farmers in this valley are not going to plant this year. Why? There's not enough water. They didn't get enough rain. They got only 3 inches of rain, even with the big rain in December. And so there's just not enough water. She herself has been noticing that her well has not been refilling. And so she's also wondering, will she have enough water to continue to live here? So it's just a very clear indication that this is not just some philosophical question. This is not just something, in my view, that will be solved by magic or positive thinking, which I believe in, but I don't think that that's enough. And recently I listened to a video that Vandana Shiva made, which I thought was brilliant. And one of the clear things that she said was, we need to train up our young people to start working with their hands. They need to plant seeds. They need to grow food. And that, to me, is the reimagination of education that I'm doing. How do we reimagine our educational systems in which we engage young people, or older people too, to do something with their hands around climate change, to do the kind of growing of food, because food security is an essential issue. Water security is an essential issue. How do we teach them with permaculture principles, agroforestry principles, syntropic agriculture principles, biointensive principles, all of these new and ancient principles that we know something about? How do we enact a response to the climate emergency that deals with the current crises in food security and water security that will become even greater as time goes on, because this is not getting better, irrespective of the fact that more and more people all over the planet are working on it. We need what we're calling in Gaia the small farm future. We're working in a country also in West Asia, in which they are understanding that the farmers in the country need to learn these techniques and principles. Composting toilets, for example, is one of the things that needs to happen so that we can deal with this water crisis. for that, we also need some changes in our legal system. So those aspects are super significant from my point of view. And we need to get on with it. We need to change the way in which we think about education so that it's not just a mental activity. In Gaiyu, we call it transformative action, learning and unlearning. Unlearning is often even more important than learning. We need to unlearn so many of the things that we were taught growing up so that we can make the changes in the paradigms. And that brings me to just the last piece, which is food and water, yes, essentials, but also how do we work with human beings? Because in my experience with eco-villages, for example, I was on the international board of the eco-village movement, and I traveled all over the world to many eco-villages. And one of the things I found was that conflict is one of the major issues that eco-villages are having a challenge with. And when I look at the decisions that we as human beings make in terms of how we're dealing with this climate emergency, for example, I see that we are not making intelligent, strategic, and rational decisions for the most part. So how we work with human beings so that we can discharge the distresses that we have, which are impeding us to make really proper decisions. So that's where we're going. Yeah. And I invite all of you to join in with longer programs, more grounded programs, and get people growing that food and designing those water retention landscapes that will help us deal with the physical and then also the emotional aspects of climate change. And I'll just mention one more thing I've been talking about lately, which is climate refugees. Our colleagues in Africa say that there are already just thousands and thousands of people fleeing from their towns and villages because of the climate emergency and looking for work, looking for food and water. And climate refugees are a really significant piece that is not being fully addressed. So happy to be here. Thank you for hearing me. And I look forward to hearing the rest and answering any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Lyra. That's a lot of information and things for us to think about. But I really appreciate you mentioning all that. And I agree, a lot of stuff, I think a lot of the Move Forward Reimagining has to come from hands. And so I actually wanted to invite Gail to speak next. He is, I mean, I'll let you introduce yourself, but I was thinking hands because you do maker spaces, you know, the Learning Planet Institute. So I was wanting to invite you to maybe speak next a little bit about yourself and the work that you're doing.
Right. Well, thank you. Thank you very much for that. I'm very pleased to be here. So I work for the Learning Planet Institute. That is, we're based in Paris, where it's shiny today, even though it's very cold right now. And where I speak from, I'm a scientist by training, so I apologize for being from that world. I started in studying the brain and how it works and how it develops, and the last 20 years I've been working on the science of sustainability, which is two different things that are not connected usually, but which I found many connections. And if I want to synthesize, it's we live in a world where there is an excess of greenhouse gases and energy. This is why we are discussing this. It's also an excess of waste of all kind. I mean, an excess of pollution. There's a shortage of water, of land. There's a lot of things like that. I mean, we all know that the collapse of biodiversity and ecosystems is threatening the very safe operating space we are navigating and living in. So in a way, and if we take if we zoom out even more, we have an excess of information for our brain. We have an excess of using matter, energy, information, power, an excess of physics, if you want. And there is a shortage of knowledge, of wisdom, of creativity, of understanding, of being interrelated, as has been discussed before. So it sounds like we need to restore the balance to the force somehow. There's a lot of excess and there's a lot of shortages, and that just doesn't match. So at the end of the day, the solutions and the equilibrium, whatever that new equilibrium will be, it won't be perfect, but it will be there. That new equilibrium will be the sum of all the solutions of all the different people. And so, and anyone, any new solution or any new way to think or to live or to change things will come from a human brain, right? So at the very, very root of everything that we are going through, whatever the problems that we're facing, comes the question of how do we make sure that humanity is maximizing the potential for creativity and for sound solution, right? That's why I think we are all on this panel, is because this how to educate for climate is how to educate for all the unbalance that we are facing. And I mean, for me, there's a quote that resonates very much. So what we do at Learning Planet, we're trying to identify, federate, and create an echo chamber for the people that are doing things differently in terms of education for sustainability. And we connect them to the upper ground, that is the OECD, UNESCO, ministries, governments, so that they can hear what's happening on the ground. So try to, catalyze that connection. And Andreas Fleischer, who is the Director of Education and Skills at OECD, at the Learning Planet Festival last year said, and I quote, and I trust, I assure you it's true, that our current education systems, they are training second-class robots that nobody needs, right? So this is for me the roots of the problem, and where the place where we can do things is really education. And what we are trying to do at Learning Planet is to see really systematically of the education system and how we can change from an industrial fabrics of robots, how we can convert that into, if you want another metaphor, an organic farming of actionists. I just love the word actionist. I think activist is the first thing that comes to hand, because you're under very strong emotions. You cannot believe that the world is going that way, so you want to be vocal about it. But at the end of the day, and it's important for understanding and bringing the awareness to many people that are not aware. So there is a very important play to here. And then there is another step where you say, well, what can I do? And how can I act to maybe maximize the ability of the activist, maybe to find solution, maybe to discuss that with the policymakers or with the industry and try to find another way around. So these ideas there are processes for changing schools. I mean, at least in France and the countries we operate, we see that in practice, if we produce something that, the good thing with humanity is that everyone has kids almost, and everyone has parents for sure. So we relate to that to that topic. That people that cannot grasp the understanding of climate, energy, water shortage. It's too complex. Okay, but kids and the education and the fact that the kids are not prepared for the world of today and the world of tomorrow, that they relate very much to. So it goes very deep. You can connect to that. And so we were able to convince a lot of policymakers and people that we thought it would not be possible to convince, that the system had to change. And in a way, I mean, in France, the system is so bad that it's maybe it's not the same in every country, but at least in our country, it was. We're very happy to see that there is an urge for changing, and so we have created programs for kids where we invite them to try to see how they can get interested as a group to a problem and develop their own way of thinking about how to solve that problem or to address that problem. So instead of being in competition on the knowledge of yesterday, which is the basic French system of educating kids, we try to help them find how to collectively define solutions that address something which is important and matters to them. And this very same principle can be applied at the bachelor degree, master degree, doctoral study. It can be applied in organizations. The very principle of how we do collective problem solving, which take many places, which can take many different version of it, there are ingredients that are almost universal, that can be used to be systematic in different contexts, from really the kids to the institutions. So yeah, that's what we're trying to do, is to identify those ingredients and develop programs to help people to actually get transformation, to be oriented towards finding collective solutions instead of trying to compete their way out in a system where no one wins.
Thank you. Yeah, wow. That's so cool. And you know what I love about all our speakers so far is actually they've been almost addressing the questions that that I was going to ask later in their opening. So I think this is amazing. The core of the crisis, what can we do? What are the pedagogies? I think so much has already come up that, I'd like to invite Victoria now to speak. And then I think after we hear from her, and maybe Zaid, we can just open it up for questions. So that's sort of, because I'm sure there's a lot of other wisdom and questions in this room, and they've addressed so much in their openings already. So I'm feeling it's been really lovely to hear all the work. Victoria, I'd like to invite you next to give us a little bit of an introduction to yourself and some of the work that you've been doing in this space.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Well, I'm Victoria Haro. I'm from Mexico. I am a co-founder and co-director of Universidad del Medio Ambiente, the University of the Environment. This is an alternative formal university actually it's the first formal university in Latin America that is focused on sustainability. I think it's important to have an ecosystem of experiences so that alternative universities are formal and non-formal, accredited, non-accredited. I appreciate the diversity of this. We are in the accredited formal exploration, trying to change the system from there. And so UMA is a community of practice, action research university. So it's an exploration of how a university can become a community of practice, learning by doing through action research processes. And we were trying to explore how to, I guess, I like Lakshmi, how she put it, what is the question? I guess for us, the question is, how can we collaboratively develop as social environmental activists the skills and the states of being that make us more efficient and also happy, if possible? We at UMA are experiencing with how to develop scientific thinking at the same time as spiritual development, as emotional proximity, as doing projects. So these four things are the four sort of pillars of UMA. And well, in terms of climate change, I think one of the important weak things that we have in learning processes is precisely the scientific critical thinking part. So I might have a little bit of a disruptive view regarding that. Hopefully able to talk about it later. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Victoria. And if you wanted to mention anything now, you can. I know we might lose you a little early. So if you'd like to share that thought now, then we have that piece of wisdom from you.
All right. I'm not sure you want to start with the disruptive view to begin with.
I think everyone here is a disruptor, so I think it'll be more than welcome. And again, just so everybody knows, Victoria has to leave us exactly at 9 IST, so in 20 minutes. So just allow her to share this piece of information or wisdom, and then we'll move forward in the call. So if you don't mind, I think we welcome disruption. So
all right, yeah, that's the idea, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess what I would share about that, I'll try to be short, is that in the question around how do we go around learning process, what do I think is crucial now in designing learning processes that are addressing the climate change issue? I would say that indeed critical thinking for me is now the point. And the reason for this is, I would say, four things. And I'm thinking, when I say critical thinking, I'm saying question. Is there is there really climate change? What is really the cause of climate change? Is there something we can do? So I'm thinking critical thinking serious, like ask everything. And the reason I think we should train in our learning processes to ask everything is because I have a strong point against authoritarianism. And I think people should have an autonomous process of taking positions and processing information, because we otherwise we would promote a context where we just, whatever the authorities are saying, being it governments or scientific authorities, if they just say this is that way, and we don't know how to question, how to research, how to have our positions, then we would put our civil rights and our liberty in a vulnerable space. So it's not so much, I'm not actually saying that it should be this way or that way. I'm not going to say anything about the answers to these questions. My point is that I am seeing a lack of questions, a lack of processes that are actually asking these questions, and a lot of people just assuming that the answers is what we've been presented with in the mainstream or in the UN. And again, I'm not saying it's right or wrong or true or not true. I'm just saying that it is very important, I think, in learning processes that we learn how to ask questions. And I think it's quite dangerous if we end up thinking, oh, I'm not a scientist, therefore I cannot understand, therefore I cannot read, because then we're back to the Tlatoanis, like we would say in Mexico, like the priests and the priestesses that talked with God and, told us what to do. And, oh, I'm not a priest, I'm not a priestess, I cannot talk to God, so I cannot say anything. And we don't want to go back to that, do we? So we definitely, I think, need to question more than we're doing, and have protect the questioning culture, not calling heretics people that are making questions. If the question is lousy, if the answer is bad, well, we should say, this answer is not good because of this and that, or I mean, there's no bad question. There might be bad answers, but I don't think there's a bad question ever. In a classroom, every question of every student is sacred, but learning how to answer and how to fundament and how to make sense of a question, that's another that's another story. So very quickly, I would say that the 4 reasons why we would need this critical thinking to be part of the learning process around climate change is, first, because we're saying that it's an emergency. And in a state of emergency, especially when it's taken as a legal state of emergency, puts in question our civil rights. So it's not a joke. We really do need to question if something is an emergency or not, because we could get to that point, and that's authoritarianism, fertile ground. Second, we have the problem of scientific authoritarianism. I'm sorry, my English gets a little, but sort of the scientific dogmatism. And we have to fight this, not because it's science and because questions are part of science, it means that science cannot become dogmatic. It can certainly do. You can have some questions not being heard in the mainstream scientific context. So it's important to pay attention and question scientific mainstream so that we do not promote scientific dogmatism. Third, there are some really interesting scientific controversies going on. And of course, some controversies are maybe not substantial, but that doesn't mean that none of them are. So of course, we are in a time where fake news and information is a mess. So we need to develop hardcore abilities of how do we discern one from the other. Sometimes we think we do, but do we really? I mean, how do we help learners and ourselves as learners, because we all are, to develop better abilities, very new abilities, nothing that our grandparents can show us in terms of internet information. So anyway, there are some very interesting controversies. For me, the main one is not around the question of if there is climate change. That's, at least from my revision, that's not such an interesting question. It seems there's good evidence for sustaining that there is. But where there is an interesting question is, what is the cause of this climate change? And one hypothesis is sustaining that the cause is CO2 production. But there's another hypothesis where climate change is a natural phenomenon. And many people think this controversy is insubstantial. I actually thought that myself, to be honest. So when I approached this controversy, I was just being congruent with my own critical thinking paradigm, but I entered that question like, oh, okay, let's just read it so I have a decent answer. I mean, I do run a university here. And to my surprise, it turned out that the controversy is quite substantial and quite important. And it's got some really important questions, especially if it were natural, then we would have to direct all our efforts and all our creativity towards helping refugees and adapting and just doing a bunch of other different things. If it's produced by CO2, then the whole set of decisions is completely different. So it's a very important question that we should not take for granted that it's one way or the other. And we do have a responsibility, I think, as citizens to demand that the science behind it is clear for us, not clear for those reading journals, in Nature or Science that we cannot comprehend. This is our civil liberties. This is our public policy. We should demand that we understand the science behind and that we can, read through it. So that's a third reason why I think critical thinking is important. And lastly, the fourth reason I would put forth is that there are some questions that are not really being answered at all. For example, we have a lot of information of all the harm that climate change brings or might bring, but we also need to understand the benefits. Might there be some? For example, what is really the effect on biodiversity? We do know that a jungle is more biodiverse than a tundra, right? So if the planet became warmer, there would be some places where biodiversity would explode and some places where it wouldn't. So it's not clear. Maybe the answer is, as we think, that it might be negative, but where is really this debate and where is really this information, what is the positive, what is the negative? So, again, I have no idea. I have no answer for this. I'm just putting attention that there seems to be only the negative. And even if the negative is stronger than the positive, I think we also need to go and delve into what, if there are at all any positive things, well, let's, grab that potential. There might be some things there. So anyway, that's my critical, little bit of a disruptive view on what a learning process around climate change should be. Thank you.
No, thank you. So I could see a lot of nodding and a lot of agreement with what you were saying and a lot of interest. You've really sparked some imagination right now, Victoria. So I really thank you for sharing that before I know you have to leave. And, somebody that I look up to a lot, Satish Kumar, who I think was also part of the opening ceremony. Satish ji basically says that, we might not have all the answers, but if we're asking questions, then we can ignite the imagination. So I really do thank you for disrupting, but I think it wasn't. I think it was a disruption. And I think you've sparked some other questions in the chat. We have about 10-15 minutes left. And I'm sure there are other questions that have maybe come up for people in the room. If people want to unmute and ask any of our panelists any questions, or if you want to put it in the chat, we can ask people, or if any of the panelists had anything else they wanted to add about, the way that you're approaching the climate, the core of the crisis, or what would be ways of engaging more people, younger people, about the crisis. Where do you guys really see the challenges in bringing people in? I think all of these questions are so important, and we have such great panelists. So if anybody also wanted to unmute, or I could see people responding to what Victoria was saying. So if there's any comments on that, please feel free to also share in the remaining time that we have. We'll wait. There's a chance Zaid will come back in another couple of minutes, and I'll have him talk about Complexity University and the Gigaton Challenge. And if he doesn't, then I'll share a little bit about that. But while we're waiting for him, in the meantime, if there's someone who had, yes, Claire, please, or Lakshmi. I guess Claire and Lakshmi and Gail then.
Sorry, I just wanted to build on what you were saying about participation. So I worked for 4 years as a community organizer. So I was specifically trying to bring people into political spaces who are deeply affected by issues and are not normally there. So my question to the panelists is, I think one of the biggest barriers, well, I think that one of the biggest barriers towards building enough power and momentum around this issue is the fact that a lot of these spaces, and I only talk from a UK perspective, and the spaces that I've been in are very middle class and white dominated. So I was just wondering if you had any, and that might be different in other countries, but if you had any insight into how we can broaden access to participation in the climate movement.
Did any of the panelists or anyone else want to sort of speak to that?
So I could say something about that. So one of the movements that we in GaiU are now involved in is the ecosystem restoration camp movement. And there are now 50 camps all over the planet. And these camps are places where anyone can go to learn about how to restore and regenerate. I don't talk about sustainability anymore because it seems to me if we sustain what we've got, we're really stuffed. But we can invite young people especially to these camps to learn the techniques that are involved in restoration and regeneration and what we're now calling empathy ecology, which has to do with the ecology of human beings and how we are connected with it all, what people often call nature. Of course, human beings are also nature. And I just wanted to add, I know my point of view is perhaps a little radical for many of the people who are on the panel or maybe the participants as well. I think that we who are in what is called education often come from a middle class and intellectual, privileged point of view. And I think that we need to encourage all of our so-called students to get more connected to the ground and to understand also the issues of land access, because people need greater access to land. Land is a very privileged, is in a very privileged position in most places in the world. People who have a lot of money have a lot of land. And that does not enable most people to be able to grow their own food. I learned recently that in Uganda, they are giving the refugees land access. Bravo. That's the kind of approach that I think we need to be looking at, how we can develop. The founder of ecosystem restoration camps, John D. Liu, he worked in the filming the restoration of the Lus Plateau in China over many years. And the way they motivated people was that they gave them access to land as they worked the land. And that's the kind of approach that I think really works. People need their own place in which they can build their houses and develop access to land. And we need to be thinking on a global level, not just on a level of privileged countries. Check.
Thank you for that, Leora. I know Lakshmi had wanted to say something, and then Gail as well. So Lakshmi, if you wanted to, yeah, go for it, and then Gail can be next.
Oh, thanks, Shweta. And Claire, what I wanted to say sort of touches upon what the question that you asked as well. So I'm going to kind of do it together. But because I think, you know, for me, the question is also, okay, why are we, why are we responding to the climate crisis? What is it that we want to achieve? End of the day, is it human survival? Is it health of the planet? Because I think that question really shines light upon how we respond to it. So what I find here in India right now is there is a huge focus on technocratic solutions. There's a lot of international money that's flowing in for technocratic solutions, which is very much focused on carbon. So it is almost as though, and what you touched upon, Victoria, it's almost as though someone said carbon is a problem. And then here we are, thousands of people jumping into the game, just like any other game that we have been on, trying to find solutions to reduce carbon without really even clearly thinking, what does it mean? Is carbon the problem? If carbon were the problem, if we solve the carbon crisis, would we solve all the other crises that we are in right now? How is that crisis related to all the other crises that's going on? And yes, when we talk about technocratic solutions, it's mostly urban middle class people who are engaged in it, educated. And that brings me to that point of maybe these spaces that we occupy as middle class educated people trying to reinvent education is also bound by and limited by the language that we use. The word climate change itself, it can have many other words. It can be a land access issue. It can be a migration issue. It can be a social justice issue, and it can all be about climate change. And when we talk about people who are facing these issues, they may not use the word climate change, but they will be talking about land rights. They'll be talking about domestic violence. They might be talking about all these different things that are real for them. I work with indigenous tribal communities through the programs that I run as well. And for them, the issue is eviction, from protected wildlife areas by the government that is trying to access land for mining, actually, in most cases. So it's political. And they may not use the word climate change. They may not be savvy enough to bring that narrative in so that they get funding for what they're actually doing, which is protecting the planet. So I think there is that spectrum in which that we are playing in, and what we talk about in terms of climate change and education could be things that have already been talked about. So growing food, yeah, this is something that indigenous communities. I wouldn't say indigenous communities because I'm not romanticizing indigenous communities or even putting that burden on them that now they have to protect the planet by helping us grow food. No, but rural communities, traditional communities, this knowledge in India still exists. It still right now is being passed down in many places in India from generation to generation, and right now we are losing it as we speak. This is a generation that is losing it. And so what conversations do we have in those brackets, and how do we bridge that gap? So again, I'm posing a lot of questions here. I'm answering questions with questions, but I have only questions. So there you go.
I think we should rename this session. The universe of amazing, imaginative questions. I think that'll be renaming the session now. I completely resonate actually with what Lakshmi you were saying. One of the hats that I also wear is I'm a journalist, and most of the journalism that I've done in India has been around the climate justice issue. And a lot of what people tell me is, in my memory, the rains have changed. When my grandfather was there, it would come at this time. I would be able to fish from June to September. Now I have to go fish from August to November, whatever that is. And the the understanding, the impacts on those communities are very visceral. In Kashmir, I've reported from Kashmir, and instead of snow, it's raining in those communities. And their entire community, the whole, everything is built around the snow. They don't know what to call it. They just know that it's different. And one of the things also that, I think Sanjay and a couple of us brought up is this idea of the most vulnerable. And Zaid's not back here, so I just want to quickly talk a little bit about the Gigaton Challenge is also doing. And for me, the idea is that, we are supporting teams, local teams around the world who are working on the abatement issue. But I think for me, the most important part is at the heart of it is equity. And what do I mean by that is that we've been trying to create livelihoods. We've been trying to support communities where food security is an issue through local teams. And it just sort of fit right now into sort of what we were all discussing. So I wanted to just talk a little bit about that, but I'm also noticing the time. And I know Gail has been waiting to speak, and we have another question from someone. Thank you, Victoria, for being with us and for inspiring us with all your questions, and see you soon. And I want to let Gail have a moment to share. And then I think Jinglin also wanted to ask a question or maybe share. So maybe we'll end there soon.
Thank you, Sveta, but I have to run. So just in 1 minute, maybe this is building up with the conversation we had on the chat with Sanjay. What I wanted to say with Design for Change is, because I think that's interesting. It's not so much about the resources and the curriculum of what is the content that can be processed from one expert to the kid. It's about the process of learning itself and the process of changing the posture of education, which is what the kids are interested in and what they feel and what they want to engage with. And some of them will be engaged with things that are related to climate. Exactly as Lakshmi was saying, there is all kinds of things that can be related to climate, and the process of engaging the kids very early on, starting at 4 years old on, what do you feel? What can you do with that? What can you try to find a solution at your level, and then run with it and share if it works or if it doesn't, and then collectively we all learn. That is a generic process for solving. And if you have that mindset, whatever the age, when they will come across climate change, they will learn about the issue. They will not deny it because they will not be afraid, or they will not collapse interiorly, and they will be able to address something that matters at their own level. So this is why I was insisting on the fact that, yes, it is very generic, but I think it is this sort of paradigm shift where we should educate to provide the right mindset instead of the right content. So that's what I wanted to say. And thanks very much for this wonderful session. Bye.
Thank you, Gail. Thank you. Bye. Thank you so much. Couple of I think Jinglin, if I think, I'm sorry if I'm saying the name wrong, but I think you had a question, and I also just wanted to invite Lauren. I hadn't heard your voice in a while. If you wanted to say any closing, anything.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Jinglin. I'm a faculty from University of Maryland. I teach a course on climate change and education. I think that I heard a lot. I'm very, very impressed and excited, but I feel there's something that needs to be thought about. That is capitalism, the human greed. So we can build a camp here, we can build a university there, but if you look at the power of capitalism, they're sweeping across the world and taking up everything called natural as resources. Like the example someone gave about China. Now China has built 3 or 4 times more housing than the whole country can live in. So there's no way you can find any animals or even birds now in China if you go anywhere. And also like here in Maryland, just all the forests are being wiped out to build new projects here and there, always good reasons, strong arguments and so on. And so I think that we need to have a movement to raise consciousness, but this consciousness can be raised from inner work, our inner attempt. So I've been teaching courses on contemplative practices like meditation, so on, yoga, to build this like inner sense of connection, to feel like we we cannot exploit nature because nature is ourselves. So that's what I want to say. I think all the work people have done are great, but capitalism, this unchecked greed, the ferocious manipulation, right, of money and so on across the world. I think that can just like eliminate all the attempts we want to do. So I think we need to have a very deep change in education and in the society to really to have something we call sustainable world. So I want to make a comment, maybe not a question.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's a very important point. I am very welcome. I don't know if Lauren, if you wanted to talk about that or something else directly. I think you might have.
I want to talk about. I want to talk about every single thing that just got brought up.
Yeah.
Just so thank you for everything that's been said. I thank you for bringing in capitalism. I was thinking to speak to that as well at the end here in my closing comment. And one way that maybe I could sort of weave some of the thoughts together that I'm having in response to the conversation is I think one of the ways that capitalism, sometimes the conversation can get so big, like it is so big, and how do we and what do we? So one of the ways we work with it at Weaving Earth is related to a reclamation of attention. And Adrienne Marie Brown, who's an amazing author, if you haven't heard of them, calls it attention liberation. So we use that language a lot. But this idea that capitalism and systems of dominance are actually like capitalizing on our attention itself, and that keeps us, someone said like robots, or what did you say, however someone phrased it, like second class robots or something. But anyway, so it's capitalizing on our attention, and it's very real, because then there are very real life needs related to our own survival personally and familially, that like as a family, that need to be dealt with. But what is it to actually reclaim our attention and then have that link to the way we address it, link to our innate belonging as beings of the earth, as a part of the ecosystem, as interrelated beings. So we do a lot of work with our youth, teens, and adults related specifically to that. And that's both spiritual and an embodied practice, and it's also really rooted in deep questioning. So I'm just doubling down on the questioning thing that you were saying. Like, I think that our capacity to actually engage in questions and remove ourselves from binary thinking is so essential, because the binary thinking is so much a part of what is holding up cis heteropatriarchy, it's holding up white supremacy. It's at the root of separation. Humans are this, or separate. So, I think that questions are so essential for getting us out of binary thinking. So I appreciated what was already said about that. I don't know if I need to say any more. And yeah, I think the last thing I mean, there's so many things I could say, but I do want to say this in closing comment, because someone asked the question around working with young people, and I think that it's really important to also bring in the importance of the nervous system and skills, tools, resources for supporting our nervous systems. That's why we have embodiment as one of our core curricular points, because it can be I'm just thinking about these young people we're currently working with. It can be really overwhelming for them to sort of look at the future and have this feeling of like, I don't know what's coming, and what's this climate change, like I can't, and it can relate to a freeze, or it can relate to a flight. It can cause all these things. So I just want to bring in, it's why we have earth intimacy, which is like deep connection to nature, and then embodiment, which is really attuning to our nervous system, and tools and practical skills for dealing with stress and activation. and co-liberation, because I think that being able to see ourselves in context to this political sphere and the spheres of dominance that are really have such a huge impact and influence on the way the whole world is moving. And so again, how that relates to our attention and how liberating our attention, and then that leading towards for what we call prayerful action. So I just wanted to say, like, I think all of that is really important. And that's it's political, it's spiritual, it's personal, it's relational, and yeah. May we bring our deep questions, and thank you so far for what's been said. And I don't know, maybe this is ending, so this is a goodbye, but I look forward to more conversation with anyone who's interested.
Yeah, I would be interested. I'm sure there'd be others as well. I actually want to check in with the organizers, Marcella, Daniel. We're actually 10 minutes over, so I wasn't sure if we should close now. I don't, if there are other sessions or if there's another 5 minutes, or how should we, just trying to honor time.
Yeah, you're welcome. The next round will be a reimagining cafe, which starts in 20 minutes. So this Zoom room isn't needed. So if the conversation is flowing and people want to continue, you're more than welcome to. And also for people that want to join the reimagining cafe, that's just an informal space for discussion and connecting with folks, and that will begin in 20 minutes. So Shweta, you're welcome to continue the conversation as you wish, or as time and space enables. And yeah.
Thanks. Thank you, Dan. Why don't we stay on for another 5-7 minutes for those who can. I've noticed that Zaid's come back, so give him also a chance to talk a little bit about his work and his journey through this. And if there's any last minute, like super burning questions, we can take those. Otherwise, I think it'll be a good place to close. So Zaid, do you want to? Yeah.
Sure. Just apologies. So I was on for the first half an hour, and then someone made a scheduling error, so I had to jump off. Anyway, I caught the kind of beginning. Just maybe I'll do a quick intro. I'll just take 2 minutes. So my name's Zaid. I'm based in Oxford in the UK, and I've been working in the climate space for about 15 years. So I work with Manish and Shweta. We run something called the Gigaton Challenge. And basically my background is that I've been working on complex challenges for 20 plus years. And the question I've kind of been asking over those 20 years is, what does it mean to be effective at responding to these challenges? So everything from climate change to child malnutrition. I've worked all over the world. And I guess, with the climate issue, a lot of what everyone said earlier kind of resonated with me. One of the things I just wanted to kind of comment on in terms of my experience has been that in the climate space, there's a large discourse about how sort of big the problem is, right? So it's like, it's global, it's huge, it's not in our control. And one response that has kind of emerged as a result of that, here's this big difficult problem is what you could think of as kind of moonshots, that we need these kind of massive, big technocratic kind of moonshots, a lot of the war metaphor that we need to go to war against the problem. My kind of response to a lot of that is that I think that's completely wrong. That actually, I think that the solution, if you like, or, quote solution, the response, if you like, to the challenge is actually small. That actually, if we have lots and lots of people doing things that are small but effective, that actually adds up to a global response. And it actually adds up to a much more effective response than these kind of centralized, technocratic, massive kind of let's go to war with the problem. And really kind of in my mind, it's like, it's about planting a seed, basically. It's like, well, how many seeds can we plant and how many of those seeds germinate? That's basically the essence of it. And the skills, if you like, and the requirements of cultivating a seed are quite different from going to war against CO2 or the climate. So it's a bit like, well, from an educational point of view, the capacities required in order to grow a seed and to germinate that seed and is contextual. It's like, it's different. It's different in Bangalore than it is in London and Oxford, but there is a common base to, growing things basically and cultivating things. So you know, the work that we're involved in doing is supporting and cultivating teams as being kind of the seeds of a response to the climate crisis. And if we have enough teams doing kind of quote the right things, we have a response basically. So that's where I was gonna stop. But yeah, and I appreciated hearing everyone. I'm sorry I missed the middle.
No, all good. Thanks for that. It's very helpful. And it might have actually addressed some of the other questions that had come up in the chat. So I think that was really, really great. Again, we're at 15. I think this conversation is never ending. I think we have an amazing group of people in this room. So I don't think we could end it in any way that would feel enough. But I think for now, just to riff off of what Zaid's saying, it's a seed that we've planted. We've sort of all connected in some way, and hopefully we can stay in touch and have more conversations. I think the more we talk to each other, obviously, the more dialogue we have, the better we are at connecting. I think that's a huge part in this process. I can see one hand. I'm just going to allow Kipi said one question or one comment, and then I'm going to hand it over to Marcella and close for the session. Yes.
Thanks, Rita. Thanks, Ed. Sorry, I just joined a few minutes back. I have a question to Zed. Thanks, Ed, for sharing that. So since you're working on this field for 15 years, there are a lot of things that might have changed. But actually for last 15, 20 years, each one of us is actually saying the words, we are planting the seeds. We're not harvesting any fruits as of now. So maybe what do you see even after 5-10 years? Should we be using this planting the seeds? Or
yeah. So obviously I use that phrase as a metaphor. So that's the first thing. And so what I would say is that you know, the beauty of kind of being small is that you can also be fast and you can be more effective, right? So just to kind of give you an example, what we do is we support teams all over the world, particularly in India, to basically respond to the climate crisis. We set performance standards for these teams and we coach them to meet the performance standards. And we've got 7 levels of performance, but the first levels, which start with, is to say to a team, we want you to reduce emissions by 1 ton in 2 weeks. And they say, well, how do we do that? And we say, well, if you took 500 kilos of food waste that was going to landfill and you composted it, you would have done it, basically. So one of the things about the climate crisis is that there's a temporal dimension to it. There's a time dimension to it. And if we don't recognize the time dimension, then we're in trouble. So part of the response is to basically say we have to operate at a pace that is dictated by the science to some extent, and we need results within those timeframes. So it's no good planting a seed 15 years ago and saying, I know you're going to be hungry for 10 years, but 5 saal baad, we're going to get some food, basically. It's like, that's no good to anybody, right? So part of it is, how do we work within the time dimensions that science is kind of telling us we need to meet? And again, I think it's completely feasible to work within the time dimensions, right? So it's a bit like, well, you know, can we collect food waste? Is it hard? Not really. Everywhere has food waste. If we looked at food waste as a country, it would be the 3rd largest emitter in the world, basically. It would be US, China, food waste. So my point is that I don't think if you planted the seed and nothing's coming, then you've got a problem, right? So if you're a farmer and you basically say, hey, I planted all my seeds, my job's done. It's like, no, your job is not done, basically. Your job is, you have to grow those things. And if they fail to grow, then your job is not done. So I would say it's not just about planting the seeds. It's also about saying, well, what has grown from it and in what time frame, and are we able to harvest it? So I would say that, again, the beauty of kind of operating at a smaller scale in aggregate is that you can actually see results very, very quickly. And actually you can operate at a pace that is completely commensurate with what the science is saying, rather than saying we're going to plan for 5 years or 10 years and then, you know, one day we'll get some food. It's like, that's no good.
Yeah. Thanks, Ed. May I connect with you later on?
Yeah, sure. I'll just put my email address into the chat box as well.
So for last 5 years, we managed to get almost 1 ton, making that awareness to put 1 ton of waste into composting, but gradually after this pandemic, it started. I mean,
I think
it went back to
I'm
the
sorry.
previous
I'm
one.
so sorry to interrupt, but I think I'll let you guys connect offline.
Yeah.
The two of you guys can have that conversation. And I noticed that there was just bringing attention to something Lakshmi said, which I also very much resonate with, which is the idea of resistance and how that plays. And we'll just let that seed, since we're riffing on this metaphor, yeah, exactly, kind of flow in. I want to give a big thanks to all the panelists. I again, like I said, I feel like with 6 amazing voices and an hour, it was given me a very impossible task. I hope that we had at least were able to meet and connect with each other, which is really the intention, and connect with each other after that and for a lot longer, in order to sort of keep working together and talking to each other about what we can do and asking those questions to each other and ourselves.